In the land where I was born, there are now women seeking justice. Justice for birth mothers. Oh Lord, hear my prayer.
When somebody takes your child, they take a very big part of you away, and nothing will ever give it back. Not even having another child. Because there's a hole, there's a big, huge hole and a big void. And I'm sad to say that I was brought up in a country like Ireland that has done that to their women and children and are still doing it. I'm so sad.
Thank you for tuning into Justice for Birth Mothers. My name is Anna Kavanagh, co-founder and convener to the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice, Ireland's largest non-TUSLA funded group advocating on behalf of birth mothers in difficulty with TUSLA, the Garda and the family court. This podcast is the 18th in the series Justice for Birth Mothers. Recently, I spent a morning with Majella Moynihan, who gave me a first-hand account of what it's like to have your baby taken at birth. Majella was born in County Cork, the fifth of 5 children. When her mother died in a car accident, Majella and her sisters were placed in a residential home run by nuns. A year after Majella became a garda, she gave birth to her son David in May 1984 and was forced to give him up for adoption. He was whisked away the moment she gave birth without ever giving her a chance to hold him, to see him or to cuddle him. She was then charged with the breach of Garda discipline for having sex and giving birth outside of marriage. So, Majella, just to tell me a little bit about a background to your case.
So in 1983, I discovered that I was pregnant, and I was a member of the Garda Síochána at the time, so it was frowned upon that I was pregnant outside of marriage. Circumstances were very difficult for me. It was deemed that I was totally immoral and I wasn't a suitable candidate for the Guards because I had got pregnant. So that continued through the process until the time of the 31st of May 1984 that I was admitted to the Galway Regional Hospital to give birth. And I arrived into the Galway Regional Hospital maybe around 1:15 a.m. and I was, what I know now, I was about 4 or 5 centimetres dilated at that particular stage, and in excruciating pain, and I remember this request, asking for the epidural and not being given it, and wondering why I wasn't being given it. So I was just told to walk the corridor, which I duly did, and then I was brought into the labour ward. I'd say now that I didn't find anybody kind or friendly in that labour ward. They were aware of my status, so that I was an unmarried mother. And I felt that they knew that, and I felt that the way they treated me was that as well. So my son was born after a very difficult birth at 5:31 a.m. on the 31st of May 1984. And my son was taken from me at 5:32 a.m. on the 31st of May 1984. I was never given the chance to hold him or to hug him or to look at him, or it was, I suppose it's easier for me now, 40 years onwards, to say that the trauma, I suppose, and all of that, but at that as that 21-year-old vulnerable woman that didn't know what was happening, and also really wasn't aware of what 𝐽𝑢𝑠𝑡𝑖𝑐𝑒 or the Catholic Church or the Garda had instigated or were started behind my back. I now know that they had my son lined up for adoption. So I can understand as to why they wouldn't allow me see my child at that particular stage. But to me, it was the cruelest thing ever to do that to a mother. I will never understand why I wasn't given the opportunity to hold my son after carrying him for 9 months, and the gift of life that I had given, and it was just taken because of the Catholic Church and the Garda Síochána and 𝐽𝑢𝑠𝑡𝑖𝑐𝑒 and all the organisations against me. I think the infliction of pain on women and children in the 80s was soul destroying for many, many women and many, many children. And unfortunately, we didn't have a voice then.
Look into your mother's face. No one else can take her place. Justice for birth mothers. Oh Lord, hear my prayer.
Majella, mothers today actually don't have a voice either, and we in the Alliance of Birth Mothers campaigning for justice are supporting mothers whose newborn babies are being taken, and Cork and Limerick is actually a black spot. You stand a much higher risk of having your newborn baby taken in those areas than in the rest of the country. And because all of the proceedings are held in the family court, they're bound by the in-camera rule. So if a mother speaks out about what is happening to her or what has happened to her, she risks being put in jail. So I suppose, Majella, you are in a very unique position to be able to describe now for us what it's like in the aftermath, in the days and months afterwards. So obviously you gave birth, your baby is taken, you're lactating, all of that. Can you take us through what you can remember of those days just immediately after the birth?
Yes, of course I can. I left the hospital on the 1st of June, which wasn't even 24 hours after my son was born. And of course I was lactating, and it was... I was out of my body. If that's an experience, that's a... You know, people might say that's a cliche. It isn't a cliche. I lived outside of my body because I wasn't able to cope with what was going on within me. My head... I didn't know. I never gave anybody permission to take my son. I never signed any paper that my son was to be taken. Lactating and all of that emotion after having a baby, I had nobody to speak to. So I was very alone in this world, and then being castigated as a member of an Garda Síochána and being told that I had discredited the Garda force. There was enough going on my head after losing my baby being taken, more so. And that feeling of loss, and that feeling of isolation, and that feeling of how alone I was in the world, and that there was no organisation, nobody available to help me. The social workers didn't want to know how I was feeling. 𝐽𝑢𝑠𝑡𝑖𝑐𝑒 had no interest in me at that stage because they had my son. And the Garda Síochána were further instigating proceedings against me, which I wasn't aware of at that time. Looking back now, and this may sound very severe, but I contemplated death because I wasn't able to cope. I was mentally traumatized, physically broken. emotionally starved. I was lost.
Motherhood is hard, support the mother and the child together. Do not tear this love asunder. Support, respect the mother. Justice for birth mothers. Oh Lord, hear my prayer.
You know, one mother has said to me that it's actually worse than the death of a baby, because if your baby dies, you know, there is just so much love and support from your family and surrounding you, and you have a grave to visit. But when a body like Tusla, or in your case 𝐽𝑢𝑠, takes your baby, you're on your own, and you know, you have no idea where your baby is gone, you know nothing about it. And you mentioned there, I think, the word shame. Tell me a little bit about how that engulfed you.
Shame was very, very much prevalent through my whole pregnancy, from, I suppose, from the first acknowledgement of the fact from the Well Women Clinic that I actually became pregnant, because we were living in the 1980s and it was just it was castigated. It was just not a thing that a woman got pregnant outside of wedlock. And the unmarried mother's allowance was in at that particular stage, and they had actually, there was talk about abortion rights and all of this sort of stuff, but it was still shamed upon and frowned upon. And it was very much me, I suppose, coming from the institutions that I had come from and being brought up in this staunch Catholic belief that you don't have sex before marriage, and you don't do this before marriage, and you don't do this. So I was very much a person that couldn't see the beauty of carrying a child, could only see the shame of carrying the child. And that is very sad today, because the greatest gift I was given was to be able to get pregnant and to give birth. But I was shamed beyond words. I was destroyed within the guards. I was called so many names. I couldn't but have shame. And I know today that I don't carry 1 ounce of shame, not one. I'd stand up in the Eiffel Tower and scream that I was a woman in the 80s that gave birth to a child outside of wedlock. I find it sad that you're still telling me that babies are being taken from their mothers. It leaves the biggest hole in your heart. And the only way that I can ever say that I have coped is that I've put a bridge over my heart. Because it has brought me to the darkest of places. That shame, that isolation, that loneliness, that guilt, wondering where is he, how is he getting on, who does he look like, what's he like in school, what does he eat, what's his personality. I think when somebody takes your child, they take a very big part of you away. And nothing will ever give it back. Not even having another child. Because there's a hole, there's a big, huge hole and a big void. And I'm sad to say that I was brought up in a country like Ireland that has done that to their women and children and are still doing it. I'm so sad.
Majella, you are just so upset. Do you want to continue?
Oh yes, I think it's extremely important that people realise, Anna, that even after 40 years, it still is raw. And it will always be raw. My son was taken, a part of me was taken without my consent. And they thought once the child was taken that I would just live on and be this wonderful person of society. But what they failed to see was they destroyed my life. They destroyed it. And my poor son had to grow up in a family without his birth mother. I don't understand it. I just don't.
One song you don't want to hear is the cry of the mother and her child taken from her. Justice for birth mothers, oh Lord, hear my prayer.
Majella, you mentioned there that you grew up in care, and we're finding in the Alliance of Birth Mothers campaigning for justice that mothers who grew up in care are disproportionately represented. It's just so easy to take their children. They're already in the system. They're known to the social workers, and it's very easy to pounce on them and take their children. So can you tell me just a little bit about growing up in care and the effect that that had on you?
Well, circumstances for me are a little bit different than a lot of other children who have actually gone to care, because my mum was killed in a road accident at the age of, she was 29 and I was 1.5. And I was put into care. And again, I suppose care back in the 60s was, for me, for the first few years I was in there, I can honestly, truthfully say that I always felt different from my friends outside of the orphanage. But within that orphanage, I felt safe because it was all I knew. And we had a beautiful nun that was over us, and a wonderful, motherly, kind, beautiful human being that brought the best out of you. Isolation, yes, of course. Feeling different, yeah. Feeling unloved. I know I got that love from Sister Claire, but I still felt unloved because I didn't have my parents. So I grew up never feeling good enough, never feeling that I was lovable, never feeling that I could fulfill my dreams, never felt that my basic rights or my basic needs were ever met, because they weren't. And they couldn't have been met with the amount of children that were there. And I don't fault Sister Claire for that. But the basic need for any child is to be loved. That's the basic need of every child, and every child's right is to be loved. In an institution where there's so many children, I suppose, looking for that constant attention and told and wanting to be told you're great and you're this and you're that. That doesn't happen. Because an institution to me was get them away and get them in there, and they're out of sight and they're out of mind. And money was passing hands to the nuns from my father. And when Sister Claire retired when I was 11, this other nun came along, and she was the devil. She was evil. She bashed me black and blue, and she really battered my self-confidence. Of any little bit I had, she battered it and told me I was unwanted, I was unloved, I was a prostitute, I was a slut, I was at this, I was at that, my father didn't want me, I was stupid, I was a dunce, I was this, and she battered me black and blue. And there's one thing that I do know. If you keep telling somebody that they have a tail, they have to eventually look back and see. And I was told so many times I was stupid that I believed it. And the importance of speaking to a child. It is like a flower. It's like a seed, and you nurture it and you mind it and you protect it. That's the same that has got to be done with any child. And when that is not done, the child will fall to the left, the child will fall to the right, because they have nobody to bring them to the centre. And I have seen through the course of many, many years, many of the people that were in institutions with me and in other institutions that have fallen by the wayside. And yes, a very, very good comment you said there about, that we are the vulnerable and, they do prey on us, and they do. And I said that in relation to my own pregnancy, that if I had been a child that had a mother and a father to stand up for me, it would not have been done to me. So I hear that comment very, very strongly. I think that I know we were the vulnerable children of society, and government and any organisations felt they could do and say what they wanted to us because we were in care.
My children have been taken by the force of law and order in Ireland, holy Ireland. Justice for birth mothers, oh Lord, hear my prayer.
Majella went on to give a first-hand account of what it is like to be a child placed in state care.
Putting children into care is not the way forward, not at all. A child needs parents, even one parent, because a child needs love, and a child needs care and attention and nurturing and all of that. One parent is better than no parent, but an institution is not where a child should be. No way. The isolation, the abandonment, the constant mental health that is going on within yourself, because you are not being told anything positive about yourself. You're being told everything negative about yourself. And we all know that the inner critic is the thing that will bring us all down. But as a child in an institution, the inner critic was constantly up there. And until I did loads and loads of work, I softened that inner critic and quietened that inner critic. This country needs to realise one thing, that the children are the future of this country. And unless we treat them with love and respect and understanding and kindness, we are going to have a society that we had back, and we've had back many hundreds of years, that women are second-class citizens. We are no longer second-class citizens. Women are the strongest of the race, and we are just powerful beings, and children are powerful beings, and women bring children into this world. And it's about time that the legislators in this country heard the voices of women and the voices of children, and are no longer dictated to by the legislators. And this in-camera rule has got to go. Children's voices need to be heard. Children don't lie. And my thing is, please, please, please listen to mothers and listen to children.
Give the mothers back their children. Give the children back to the mother. Justice for birth mothers. Oh Lord, hear my prayer.
Majella, I'm looking here at your book, A Guarded Life. Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
Goodness. Thanks, Hannah. A guarded life, my God, it is a guarded life.
And a beautiful photograph of yourself as a young Garda.
Thank you so much.
On the cover.
Well, I started writing this book in 2005. In 1984, I gave birth to my son David. And after that, I suffered extreme mental health issues, and I drank quite a lot because of the trauma and everything that had inflicted on me. So in 2005, I started putting, I suppose, memories down on paper, and it's amazing how things happen, really, sort of. But I'm going to skip from 2005. Well, I kept writing little bits and little bits and little bits, and prayed really that someday I would have the courage to tell my story. But in 2016, I was really helped along by a girl called Noelle, who wrote a play about her own experiences, and it was on in the Civil Theatre in Tala. And my husband and I were present at the show, and it was heart-wrenching. But after it, there was questions and answers. So it was the first time ever that I had spoke about my experience. And from that night, I had the most fantastic women in my corner. And I was guided and helped along in relation to documentaries, interviews, and the releasing of the book. So Aoife Kelleher, who was a wonderful filmmaker and documentary maker, and Aoife ghostwrote the book with me. And the book just lays out my story as my story, my memories, what life was like for me in an institution, what life was like for me in the Garda Síochána, another institution, what it was like for me with my baby being taken, what it was like for me being charged with giving birth and charged with having sex with an unmarried member of an Garda Síochána, and also being brought into a sworn inquiry with all men, sat in the middle and just violated. For me, it's a book of my truths, and for me, it's a book that I knew my story had to be told. And one thing I do know is that my book is still selling 5 years down the road, and that it has helped so many women to speak. And that is all I ever wanted, was to be able to help the women that felt they didn't have a voice. So am I happy I wrote the book? Yes, I am very, very happy I wrote the book. It was hard for me to go back. It was hard for me to relive all the pain again. But through that pain, I have become the person that I am today, which was the person that was always in there, but I was so afraid to be. And so afraid to show the light and show, I suppose, it's not even beauty, I suppose it's the light of the child and the voice of the child, and to embrace, for the adult in me to embrace that child was extremely important. And for me also to accept that my son was taken, and that was an extremely difficult part of my life. And I was coddled into making that decision by Cura. So it was their kindness that they portrayed to me wasn't kindness for me. All they wanted was my child. They didn't, nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my well-being, nothing to do with anything. They had somebody lined up for my child. So they treated me, who was a vulnerable person, who thought that if somebody was nice, they were for me. They weren't. So I have learned an awful lot of hard lessons by writing this book, but I've also become free. And that is fantastic. I've become free, and I am just hoping and praying that I will be able to help and listen to other women and children and help them not to go down the darkness of the road that I've had to go down, because I've had a very, very dark life. And
Well, Majella, it has been a huge honour and a privilege to sit here with you this morning to chat to you, and I want to thank you so much. And I know that the people listening to this podcast, they're going to find huge, huge comfort, inspiration and hope in what you have just shared with us this morning. And it's just wonderful to be in your presence and to see you. Your life has just turned completely around now, and I have got to know you in recent weeks, and you're just so bubbly and full of joy and full of happiness and full of gratitude, and you delight in living.
well, that is it, okay? And it is lovely to have met you, Anna, also, and I congratulate you on your work. I admire you, and it is absolutely lovely to see you doing what you're doing for women. Thank you. A pleasure to have met you also. Thank you very much indeed.
Justice for Birth Mothers is a co-production between the Alliance of Birth Mothers Campaigning for Justice and 𝑀𝑜𝑚PAS Media. The podcast series received no funding and is made possible by a team of volunteers. Thank you for listening, and please share this podcast with your family, friends and contacts. Until next time, 𝐵𝑖𝑟𝑡ℎ.
In the land where I was born, there are now women seeking justice. Justice for birth mothers, oh Lord, hear